So, what if we could boil down the entire sprawling history of civilization to just a handful of the most important ideas? The big ones that took our ancestors from scattered groups of hunter gatherers to the people who built the world we live in today. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do.
This right here is the big question. How did this happen? How did we go from just another species roaming the planet to a force that literally shapes the world? The answer, in a word, is civilization.
All right, our story, it doesn't start with some big explosion or a massive war. Nope. It starts with a single seed planted in the fertile ground of Mesopotamia, way back around 4000 BCE. And that one little idea, it changed absolutely everything.
And this was the absolute game changer: agriculture. I mean, think about it. For the very first time, we didn't have to wander around looking for food. We could make our own. We could have a surplus. And because we could stay in one place, cities like Uruk just exploded. We're talking over 50,000 people. But there was a catch. Our diets got way less diverse, which actually made us shorter. And for the first time ever, we were tied down, connected to the patch of dirt that fed us. Okay, so now you've got a brand new problem, right? You have thousands and thousands of people all living on top of each other. How do you keep it all from descending into complete chaos? Well, humanity had to literally invent the idea of social order, and different cultures came up with some wildly different ways to do it. And the solutions they came up with, they tell you everything about what a culture truly valued. On the one hand, you have civilizations building these massive monuments to their gods, totally focused on the afterlife. And then you have the folks in the Indus Valley. Their greatest achievements were underground. They were obsessed with the practical problems of city life, especially public health. I mean, these guys were masters of hygiene. This wasn't just a ditch. We're talking about advanced toilets, complex underground drainage, covered sewers to keep the city clean. It was a level of public works that nobody else would match for centuries. Just incredible. Now let's jump over to ancient Egypt for a minute. It's a completely different story. The most amazing engineering projects there had nothing to do with public health in this life. They were all about making sure one guy, the pharaoh, had a smooth ride into the next one. Their solution for order was this incredibly rigid social pyramid. Every single person, from the farmer in the field to the priest in the temple, had one job, really: to serve the pharaoh, who they saw as a living god on earth. The whole society was built for him. All right, so meanwhile, over in Babylon, another huge idea for keeping order was taking shape: written law. King Hammurabi comes along and says, you know what? This shouldn't just be about what the king feels like on a Tuesday. No, order should come from a clear set of rules that everyone can see, literally carved in stone. And this gives us that famous phrase we all know, right? An eye for an eye. On the surface, it sounds totally fair, equal justice. But if you dig a little deeper into the code, you find out that justice wasn't exactly equal for everybody. It turns out the law itself baked inequality right into the system. Popping out the eye of a nobleman would get your own eye popped out. But if you did the same thing to a slave, you just had to pay a fine. So the value of your eye or your bone, it literally depended on who you were. So once you've figured out food and you've got some kind of order, well, now you have the luxury to ask the really big questions. You can look up from the grind of survival and ask, okay, so what's the point of all this? In India, that search for meaning became a really personal story. You have this prince, Siddhartha, who's lived this perfect, sheltered life. But then he goes outside the palace walls and sees sickness and death for the first time, and it shatters his world. His quest wasn't for gold or for land. It was to figure out what was going on inside his own mind. And what he found under that fig tree was this idea of enlightenment. Now, this was a huge deal because it suggested that the whole point of life wasn't about pleasing the gods or serving the king. It was about finding peace inside yourself. A pretty radical alternative to the big state religion, which of course brings us to maybe the biggest question of all, one we're still wrestling with today. Who gets to be in charge? And why them? And boy, did the answers vary. In China, you had the mandate from heaven, which was basically the idea that God wanted a particular family to rule until he didn't. In Sparta, you had a brutal military elite in charge. And then you had Athens, and they tried something just completely nuts. They didn't just vote for the smartest guys in the room, they used a lottery. They had this machine, the Claritarian, and it would just randomly spit out the names of citizens who would run the government for a year.
The core belief was that any citizen was capable of ruling. Think about that for a second.
But as you can imagine, not everyone was on board. The philosopher Plato, he thought this was completely insane. He was like, look, running a country is like steering a ship in a storm. Are you really gonna pick a random guy from the crowd to do that? Nope. Plato argued you needed an expert, a wise philosopher king.
So what happens when these huge civilizations, with their different ideas about everything, finally start to collide? Well, these interactions could go a few different ways. They could be peaceful, they could be incredibly violent, or they could create something brand new.
And you really got the whole range of possibilities. Sometimes you got peace, like the world's very first recorded peace treaty between the Egyptians and the Hittites. Other times you got all-out war, like when the Greek city-states had to band together to fight off the massive Persian Empire. And then you got exchange. The Silk Road wasn't just moving silk. It was a superhighway for goods, cultures, and ideas, connecting half the world.
So you see this pattern, right? Empires rise, they clash, and eventually they fall. But here's the amazing part. The empires might die, but their best ideas, they can live forever.
We always hear about the fall of Rome in 476 AD as this cataclysmic end to everything, the Dark Ages. But it's really not the end of the story. It's more of a handoff. The physical empire might have crumbled, but its most powerful ideas, and the ideas of all the civilizations that came before it, they didn't just vanish. They got passed on.
I mean, just think about our world today. Every single one of these core ideas is still with us. We still live in cities made possible by agriculture. Our entire legal system is built on the idea of written law. We still organize ourselves in hierarchies, we still debate the best way to govern, we still search for meaning, and we're more globally connected than ever. The foundations they laid, we're still living in that house. So that really leaves us with one last question to chew on. If their world was built on these huge ideas, agriculture, divine right, democracy, written law, what are the big foundational ideas that are building our world right now? It's something to think about, because our chapter in this incredible story is being written every single day.